It's funny how we understand things when we're young. I remember being absolutely convinced water came out of this exploding light bulb fixture in our basement. Just made perfect sense to me then.
Right. Or drawing chimneys sticking straight out the side of a slanted roof.
Exactly. It's that kind of maturing and understanding that Paul talks about, isn't it? In 1 Corinthians 13, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things.
Hmm.
And that really sets the stage for our deep dive today. Our mission really is to look at how the New Testament writings, especially concerning the telos, the end, the imminence, the big transitions of that whole Second Temple period, how they deserve our most mature consideration.
Yeah, moving beyond maybe some, well, conventional interpretations.
To get to a more robust understanding of the historical and covenantal side of things.
And the main source we're digging into today is a really interesting new book. It's called Time to Grow Up, Rediscovering the Urgency of New Testament Faith. It's by Mark Mountjoy, just out from True Christian Press in 2025. What's great about Mountjoy's approach, I think, is how careful he is. He pays really close attention to the original Greek, understands the whole historical context of the Second Jewish Commonwealth, respects tradition.
But keeps it accessible.
Exactly. Pastoral sensitivity, good metaphors. And he tackles these, what he calls the urgent time statements head on. He argues that really understanding them, maturely actually strengthens faith, doesn't weaken it.
That is a powerful idea. So what you can expect from us today, listener, is really an invitation. Let's consider how we can all benefit from maybe some clearer pathways to deeper scriptural understanding. We're ready for some advanced study, digging into the text, the history. Okay, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So when we talk about urgency, Paul's letters,
Good.
they leap to mind, right? He uses some very, very specific language. It feels immediate, present tense. Can you unpack how Mountjoy looks at some key passages?
Absolutely. Mountjoy really shows how this immediacy is just woven through Paul's thinking. A great example is 1 Corinthians 7.31. Paul says, "Tis come into exmageske."
No.
The fashion of this world is passing away.
Okay.
And the key word Mountjoy highlights is perigai. It's present active, indicative in the Greek. That means it's something already happening, actively in motion as Paul is writing.
Not just will pass away someday, but is passing away now.
Precisely. It's happening then.
So this passing away in 7.31, how does that connect with what Paul says just a few verses earlier in 7.26 about a present distress? Does Mountjoy link those?
Oh, absolutely. That word for present distress is enstusan. It means something that's already started. It's already standing right there.
So not hypothetical.
Not at all. Mountjoy really stresses Paul is talking about a situation his readers were actually experiencing. That's a real crisis, not some vague future problem. And this ties right into Romans 13, verses 11 and 12.
Right, where he talks about the time.
Yeah, that vivid picture. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. E caro. But what's really striking, and the book points this out clearly, is what Paul says right before that. Our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. Romans 13.11. Think about it. He's writing to people who'd only been Christians for a few years.
That is striking. So what salvation could possibly be that much nearer for them specifically?
Exactly. It makes you pause.
So what does this all mean then for knowing the time, as Paul puts it? Did he expect his readers to really get this immediacy on a practical level?
Mountjoy argues, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Paul expected them to grasp the kairos, this critical, decisive moment they were living in.
Right.
And he kind of doubles down in Romans 16.20, doesn't he? The God of peace shall bruise Satan under your feet shortly. Antashe.
Shortly.
And Mountjoy makes a fascinating connection here to Jesus' own warnings back in Matthew 12. Remember the unclean spirit leaving the house Judea only to come back with 7 more wicked spirits?
Right.
Mountjoy sees Paul describing the crushing of Satan's power within that old covenant system before its final catastrophic return, in that period leading up to AD 70 and beyond, maybe even to 132 AD.
Wow. And that fits so well with what Jesus himself said in Luke 21.28. When these things begin to come to pass, then look up. Your redemption draws near. That same idea, agisai, draws near.
Exactly the same root.
So it sounds like Paul wasn't inventing anything new here. He was just confirming for the Romans. Yeah, that night of the old system, it's almost over. The full daylight of redemption is dawning right now for your generation.
That's precisely Mountjoy's reading. Paul is echoing Jesus' promise for that specific time, reinforcing it. And if we shift gears a bit, look at the letter to the Hebrews. Mountjoy calls it a real-time commentary on this massive transition in salvation history. It's like reading someone's journal as history unfolds around them.
And it starts right off the bat, doesn't it? Those opening words. In these last days, and they step to Kodam Gon Taston. What's the weight of that phrase for this argument about urgency?
It immediately puts the readers, right at the climax. This is it. And then, when the writer talks about the world to come in Hebrews 2, the Greek is melison. Mountjoy points out this literally means about to come.
Not way off in the future come.
No, about to. Imminent for those Jewish Christians. The book paints them as being in a kind of second exodus, heading for that rest in chapter 4. The writer is carefully building this case. New priesthood replacing old, promises becoming reality, a permanent system replacing the shadows.
And then you get that incredibly direct statement in Hebrews 8:20 about the Old Covenant, becoming obsolete and growing old and ready to vanish away. Palinon kaviskon idisispoin. That doesn't sound just theoretical, does it? It feels like something they could almost see.
That's crucial. Mountjoy argues this wasn't abstract theology, it was a visible process. They could see the signs, the temple system decaying, the rising tensions with Rome, the shifts in authority. And when Christ appears at the end of the ages, Usintelion in Hebrews 9, it places his readers right at this pivotal historical moment. They aren't just reading about it, they are living through it. And this all builds, to that intense urgency in Hebrews 10. The writer says, yet a very, very little while, these believers were right on the edge of receiving what all the prophets had longed for.
Like Peter saying the prophets were serving them.
Exactly. Just like Peter says in his letter, and Hebrews 11 reinforces it, all those heroes of faith were pointing toward this moment.
That really does bring home the pastoral wisdom of Hebrews. The writer is basically coaching them through the exact crisis Jesus predicted, given all the pressure, the persecution these specific Jewish Christians were facing. How does Mountjoy frame the importance of those better things in Hebrews? What if they didn't arrive for that generation?
Well, Mountjoy stresses the writer is guiding them as their whole world is ending. Temple, priesthood, sacrifices, everything. They were under intense pressure, maybe even violence, to go back to the old ways.
Right.
So these better things, better covenant, promises, sacrifice, hope, were described using words like now, night, at hand, anges, and coming in a very, very little while.
Yeah.
Mountjoy's point is stark, suggesting those promises failed for that generation. That would be encouragement. He calls it pastoral malpractice.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine telling people losing their property, maybe facing death, hang on, your vindication is just a little while away? If a little while meant thousands of years.
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
The book argues these were real, tangible transitions that generation was meant to experience, fulfilled right then.
That perspective shifts things dramatically. Okay, let's pivot now to James, addressed to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, right?
Yeah.
It really captures this intense social conflict, economic struggle. What was the reality like for them?
Oh, the language in James 5.4 is just raw. Look, the wages of the laborers withheld, estimenes, by you cry out. That word kratzai, it's anguish, it's a shriek. As Mountjoy paints it, this wasn't, abstract stuff. This was Jewish Christians being cheated out of their pay, possibly starving, because they followed Jesus. The split between the Jewish establishment and these followers of the way was severe, with real economic consequences.
And not just economic. James 2.7 mentions Christians being dragged into courts. Akusin umis kritivia, by people who blasphemed Jesus' name. So, legal trouble too.
Exactly. Real persecution. And what does James tell them? Be patient, macrothymolesi, until the coming of the Lord. James 5.7. Establish your hearts. Storixetetas cardias human. Because, and this is key, the judge is standing before the doors. James 5.9. Hestoken. Mountjoy explains it's present perfect tense. It means he is already standing there, right now.
Okay, so thinking about that severe hardship, economic ruin, social ostracism, how could telling them, be patient, the judge is already at the door, be any comfort, any real call to action, unless that vindication was truly meant for their immediate future?
It's only comfort because it was imminent. That's Mountjoy's point entirely. And he connects it straight back to Jesus' parable, the persistent widow and the unjust judge in Luke 18.
Right, where God promises justice.
God promises to avenge his elect speedily. In Textia, there's that phrase again. Same word Paul uses, same word in Revelation. James is telling them, those very authorities crushing you now, they're about to face God's justice, not millennia from now, speedily, in your lifetime. Hold on, because relief and vindication are at hand.
The consistency across Paul, Hebrews, James, it's pretty remarkable. But does this immediacy hold up elsewhere? What about Peter, John, Jude? Does Revelation fit this pattern?
It really does. It's compelling how consistent it is. Peter, who saw the risen Christ, writes with that same urgency. 1 Peter 4.7, the end of all things is at hand. Tike, that word again.
At hand.
And even more pointedly, Mountjoy highlights 1 Peter 1.12, where Peter says the Old Testament prophets were actually serving his first-century readers when they spoke of the coming grace. All those ancient words were converging on their generation. Then you look at John. His letters feel even more urgent, if that's possible. Little children, it is the last hour, est in 1 John 2.18, and he connects it directly to the Antichrist they could already see.
The last hour.
Yeah. And Jude, too, in his short letter, refers to his time as the last time, when mockers were already active. But really, it's Revelation where these time statements become unavoidable, almost revolutionary in Mountjoy's view. Right at the start, Revelation 1.1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, to show his servants things which must shortly take place.
Okay, on touche again. Shortly. But this brings up that classic question, doesn't it? If things were happening shortly, how does Mountjoy deal with Jesus saying in Matthew 24.36, of that day and hour no one knows, not even the Son, but only the Father? How does the book handle that apparent tension?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Mountjoy addresses it directly. He argues it's not a contradiction, but a progression of revelation.
Okay.
When Jesus spoke in Matthew 24 during his earthly ministry, his statement about not knowing was completely true at that time. He voluntarily limited himself in the incarnation. But by the time John receives the revelation, maybe around AD 62 or so,
Something's changed.
something profound has changed. The risen, glorified Christ is now revealing precisely what he previously said wasn't known to him then. So, for Mountjoy, those opening words of Revelation essentially supersede the earlier statement in the Gospels. The Son, now glorified and in full communion with the Father, is revealing the timing, and that urgency just builds in Revelation. To the church in Thyatira, Jesus says, "Hold fast until I come." Rev 2.25, speaking to people who would see it. To Philadelphia, "I am coming quickly."
Huh.
Rev 3.1. These aren't vague hopes. They're specific guarantees for those people. Quickly. And by Revelation 6, you hear those cries of terror as judgment unfolds. "Fall on us, hide us. The great day of his wrath has come." Rev 6.16-17. Mountjoy points out, this is almost word for word what Jesus told the women of Jerusalem would happen in their day. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, "Fall on us." Luke 23.30. These aren't fuzzy predictions of distant events. They're about the crisis that would end the Second Temple age within a decade. And if you look at the structure, Revelation even gives us, well, startlingly precise history. Mountjoy goes into the 12,260 days mentioned in Revelation 11 and 12.
Right, that specific number.
He argues it's not just symbolic. It lines up exactly from the start of the main phase of the Jewish war in early 67 AD to the day the daily sacrifice